So we're talking about Indonesian development. What else can you tell me about the development strategy that Indonesia was choosing, given we just discussed Lorenz curves? What does this tell you they're trying to do? Yes, sir?
Of the bottom 50.
You have all the answers today. They're trying to reduce income inequality by working on the poorest people first, the rural sector. Is that the best solution for the economy? We don't know. The question then is why? Partly because you have a dictator, but this is a benevolent, I want to say benevolent dictator. What did you hear about Suharto in the video segment?
He was the children of farmers.
He
Or
was,
a child of rice farmers.
let's say, he grew up in the rural area. So he was sympathetic to the fact that there's not enough food right now, and not just there's not enough food, what made it even more urgent? Famine. Go for the urgent. Go for the jugular. Pick the big apples first. Famine. What does famine suggest to you?
Bad policy.
Okay, maybe bad policy, but he's coming in with a dictatorial policy, but what else could have happened? Assuming not bad policy. Somebody comes to you and says, I have no food to feed my children. What are you going to ask them before you help them? Don't answer that question. Go back to Indonesia now. Okay, I didn't know where that was going. Something went wrong. Otherwise, it would always have been famine. To arrive at famine means there was crop failure. Because the population will grow every year, not very fast, 2%, maybe 3%. But to have a crisis that needed an intervention suggests that something happened on the supply side. I want to go Google that in a couple of minutes and find out what happened. What caused this situation to go south? For the authorities to say we need an immediate solution, top down. Yes, you have this military dictatorship. But prior to that, what caused the crisis?
They said production fell, but I don't know if they said why.
Right. So this is where good thinking people, critical thinking people, who have access to information at their fingertips will Google that year and see what happened that year so that now they're very informed. You know what? Something went wrong. If you were Indonesian, you probably would have known. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care. Ignorance and apathy, don't care. You pay a little bit of attention and say, you know, something went wrong in Indonesia. And it caused the dictator person, head of government to say, we got to fix this problem. What was an alternative to the strategy they chose? Low-hanging fruit. Imports. Man. He's hitting home runs for every delivery. Imports. That could have been an easy fix. Okay, we don't have enough rice, let's import rice from India or another Asian country, because one of the things you heard in the video segment is that if you had to take the average representative person on the planet for the job, he would be a rice farmer. And you probably haven't thought about rice farming on your own, but when you think about the fact that that would be like the most popular, or most, not popular, maybe popular, what's the word I'm looking for? Representative job in the world. An agricultural industry operation. We don't think agriculture in America, 2% of the population is agriculture. So it doesn't come on our radar. But for the world as a whole, agriculture. And then among agricultural crops, which crop? And you saw how they grow rice. You probably never thought about it before. You have to flood the land because that's how rice grows. At least the starting process to be saturated like that. So something happened. If you don't have enough rains, that could cause a crop failure too. But to have this water to flood the lands as you grow the crop, and if you can't do that, you can't make it rain. So that's easy enough for somebody to check and see what happened that year. That resulted in this, what looks like a drastic solution, but maybe not drastic because the world was preaching. Remember, this is the decade of development, or the generation of development. Moving these countries from their former colonial masters to independence, and they have to ask, what strategy are we going to choose? One is to go after increasing the bottom 50% and taking care of the farmers, because the majority of people in the world are rural, because 70% of India and 70% of China is still rural, and that's what, 40% of the world's population right there? 3 billion people. So if the majority of the people in those countries are rural, you go to other countries and aggregate the world, the representative person would be a rural person, which means very low education. I kind of skipped over the data, I think, when we were looking at India versus Jamaica, the comparison. Can anyone pull out that table, comparison of India and Jamaica? A table with lots of numbers. Extra credit, first Okay. That was unfair, right? To stand by her as an extra credit. Like, only one person can get it today. What am I looking for? Not that one. Oh, that's Jamaica, India. Don't think I didn't get good here.
You didn't get to it.
All right. Oh, it's on Moodle. Yeah. Everything's on Moodle,
So we all get credit.
which means nobody gets credit.
Oh, wow.
So here's the point: the average number of years of schooling in India. Make a guess.
7.
4.
No, 4, 5 or 6. 6th grade education. So take that and apply it to China, and apply it to Indonesia, and apply it to a few other countries. And you see that when you're talking rural, you're talking about uneducated, well, less educated. And at what stage do you need a formal education where you do science and math and languages when you're going to be a farmer? What you need to know is how to farm, not how to be a good academic student. Of course, every farmer wants his child to get a better education so he can leave and have a real sophisticated life as opposed to farming, because the old adage, a farmer's day is never done. Everybody's trying to make their kids stand on their shoulders and kill giants. So to go after the rural area as a development strategy says that you're probably going to grow more slowly but more evenly. You're going to reduce the income inequality, and that's the big rock in your economy. We're going to take care of making sure nobody is left behind. I think one of the Bushes had a policy, no child left behind. Imagine that as a national policy in many poor countries. We're going to build schools. So the guy, I didn't get his name, so I just put a blank for his name. Wole Soyinka. I need to ask someone who speaks that language to help me with the name. And one of the things Wole said was, when I started high school, 11 miles, 18 kilometers. So let's say 10 miles. 5 miles to and 5 miles back, uphill both ways. And think of your difficult life, where if you can't get internet connection, it's stressful. He's walking 11 miles every day to school, with his shoes strung over his shoulder because there are no roads. It's mud. Now he is a scientist, but he started out as a rural guy with nothing. Now he's impressed that there are roads and electricity. Infrastructure has come to the rural area. The country has decided, whether it's by dictatorship, command, or some other policy, that they're going to take care of the rural area. So you can view this video segment as growth with reduced income inequality. The strategy, growth with reduced income inequality. This would be what Muhammad Yunus would call development, because it's helping the bottom 50%. Whether the experiment worked or failed, by Yunus's definition, this is economic development. It's slower growth, especially when you have crises. You could see it going forward 2 steps and going back 3 steps, but it's development because you're concentrating on fixing the problems for the bottom 50%. One of the things that Yunus said is that the solution came from outside, and sometimes the outsiders have a solution that works for their economy, but it will not necessarily work for your economy. So where is Indonesia? in the world map? Where's Indonesia?
South Pacific. South Pacific.
Okay. What do you think the weather is like there?
Same as here. Hot.
All year round you're growing crops. The growing season here is April to October. All American crop, well, in the south it's a bit longer. Canada is even shorter. But farmers are scientifically programmed to plant now and reap now, and then have the pumpkin thing, what's that called again? Holiday. Sorry. I've never done it. My kids said, Dad, how come we can't do it? I said, because they don't know what it means. I'll buy you candy. Here you go. I'm not sending up. Where was I? You can grow crops every single day. It's a different technique when you can plant and harvest every day because the temperatures are pretty much the same all year round. The dry season and the rainy season may affect how much water there is, but if you have irrigation, you can even out the water supply so that you can plant and harvest every day of the year with some small variation in another output. It's a different technology then when the scientists come in, the scientists who are coming from countries where the growing season is 6 months to a culture where the growing season is all year long with different pests and bacteria and other things to help the crop. And you think in other climates the cold weather will kill off these things, but in the warm climate they never, it's just a cycle. And you apply an external solution that doesn't actually work for the local area. And you can see what went wrong. Different environment. So that's why Muhammad Yunus is saying the solutions need to come from the inside. And it's okay to get solutions from the outside. You just have to know what the challenges of importing solutions will be. So that's as much as I will say about this. I think that's as much as I will say. So Sagasti was saying that in this era of development after World War II, and countries are becoming independent and trying to find their own way, whether by dictatorship or democracy or capitalist communism, whatever the case might be, or some other ism, they're trying to find their own way. But the foreign imported technology can help you to get there faster. But not only is Suharto telling them what to do, we also have other people around the world telling them what to do. They said in one of the earlier video segments, every economist worth his salt was consulting to a developing country in the 40s and 50s because there was such a high demand for countries to develop that they were importing economists. So the professors at Yale and Harvard and Princeton, etc., were all consulting. Here's how you fix the problems that you have. Here's how you develop. Yes, sir?
I was going to say, are we going to touch the graphs
Which graphs?
on the paper?
With my finger?
No.
Oh.
Transfer.
Yes. Thank you. Touch the graphs. All right. So I put some graphs in there for you to do some thinking. And we don't need to do that thinking right now, even though I just gave us 2 extra days before the test. Let's see what I will put in there. So on the test, I'll ask you some analytical questions which will show me that you're economics students. Farmers were given credit and reliable prices. If you had to find a word to describe the support the farmers were getting, they were being told what to do, but they were also being given access to prices and financing. Tell me what runs through your mind right now as you hear this. Subsidy. Tell me why you said subsidy.
That's what we do to our farmers. Makes it easier for them. Prices are more reliable.
So that would be price supports, not necessarily subsidy. Subsidy would be if it's costing them $10, but they can sell it for $5, then we're subsidizing the second difference. So the customer's paying you and the government is paying you. But if you're telling you here's the price you get charged, high price, then it's a price support, not subsidy. Somebody else? I'm sure there's plenty of people in the class today. I'm hearing one voice. Yes.
Mine wasn't like using in economic terms, but I was thinking the government was kind of acting like a parent, like giving them the rules, but there's also like benefits of them. So it's just a way of protecting the farmers.
And every country, I said every rich country protects its farmers. So why can't poor countries do this? And if you are intentional about the development, you get in there and you say, this is what we're going to do. The question is, will it necessarily work? It takes a lot of babysitting. But I would say that's how the U.S. agricultural sector is as well, because you have extension officers who will come to your farm and they will give you the advice on what to do. So agriculture gets a lot of support in rich countries, and it only makes sense that if farmers in rich countries are getting a lot of support in terms of subsidies or price supports or advice or consulting, then the poor country farmers should get something if their governments can afford it. I think I said earlier that because of our own agricultural policies, when we sneeze, the third world catches pneumonia, because we do things to manipulate the markets so they can't sell their products to us. And then you saw that 1-minute segment where American farmers were producing rice. Why? Because the government is subsidizing it. Our government is subsidizing the production of rice. Then farmers elsewhere want to supply us rice at a cheaper price, but we can't. So the whole U.S. agricultural policy and European agricultural policy is so messed up that, again, to use the same bad cliche, when the rich countries sneeze, the third world catches pneumonia. And it's hard to fix, because every farmer in a rich country has Congress critters who will make sure that they continue to get supports. And I'm not against farming. I understand that you don't want your national security of feeding your people to be at the behest or control or influence of somebody else. If you can protect your country in times when there's a SARS or you name the whatever virus there is out there, you figure we need that insurance, even at a higher price. It's a chance we're going to take because we don't want to necessarily be exposed. I bought some apples recently, and the amount of wax on the outside of the apples made me just toss that. I kept thinking, they don't need to look pretty, they just need to taste good. But whatever country they were being brought from, even the U.S., there was a wax coating to make them look good on the shelf and to preserve the shelf life. This is a recent thing, because fruit sat on the shelf and it went bad and they lowered the price, and that's how it worked. It shouldn't sit there on the shelf for 2 weeks. That's not how agriculture should work, but that's our technology and our progress, that we have a way to increase the shelf life of fruit.
Apple cider vinegar will take that off.
Yeah.
It would be easy.
What? Yeah.
Apple cider vinegar.
Yeah. Or just buy the apple juice. Or the banana, or whatever. Yeah, anyway, so we have figured out, and maybe that's what I need to be educated about, apple cider vinegar in my house, so that I can take care of my... But Cooper wants to draw some graphs here, so let's draw some graphs. Now we're at test time. Rice production rose 400%. So draw a graph. Show me rice production increasing 400%.
It was 41%.
400 is a big percentage. 41? 41%. Thank you. Good catch. 41%. Show me rice supply increasing 41%. Now we're at test time. So here's the rice supply. Call it 100. Here's the rice demand. Here's the rice supply. Here's the rice price. Here's the quantity of rice. Show me rice supply increasing 40%. A nice trick is to use vertical supply curves, so that it just takes away some of the complexity of the analysis. So I'm going to push this out to 141. S1, S0. So tell me what you see. Duh.
Price decreases.
Price decreases. So if we were operating at equilibrium, there would be a price decrease. Is this necessarily bad, good, or no opinion? Respond like an economics student.
It's good for the consumer.
Good for the consumer. Very good. So overall, we'd say it's a good thing, because if the farmer is going to increase the supply, the farmer is not going to do something that's unprofitable. Well, shouldn't. So the farmer might stretch the profits over a larger quantity, so the overall profitability might not increase necessarily, but he's not worse off, and consumers are better off, so this is a good thing. Plus, this is a top-down policy, so The government wants it to happen and made it happen. What does it say in the second sentence? Indonesia quickly became self-sufficient. So show me the before and after in the second graph. Before they became self-sufficient, what does that analysis look like? If you're not self-sufficient, then you are importing. So show me imports. The second panel. Pre-technological grain revolution. Pre-grain revolution. Price, quantity. Show me an analysis that suggests you understand what the sentence is saying before the Green Revolution. So you give me a demand supply analysis, supply, demand. If they were importing, what needs to be added to the graph? I know you know. I know you know. Doesn't know. Imports. Where do you show imports? At a price that is show off. It's got nothing. Go for it. Thank you very much. You get the price today. E-bar. Imports. Yeah. Suddenly he remembers. Imports. So if I wanted to apply that now to the first graph, to say they went from importing to being self-sufficient, at the quantity of 100 they're importing, at a quantity of 141 they're self-sufficient. What does that tell you about the pricing? Around the same. So this is the price. The price is kind of stable. And what happened is we increased the supply up to the point where we can feed ourselves. We went from importing at that price to now having the domestic supply meeting the demand at that price. Indonesia is the third largest, I think, population in the world after the US and Russia. So nothing to sneeze at. And I think Brazil is number 4, used to be. So it's up there. What did I just say? No, India and
China?
India and China. That's geography. Geography, sorry. India and China. And I think the US and Indonesia are up there. Again, you Google this and say, Professor, you're wrong. Every single day you're wrong. That makes me feel good because you're paying attention. I don't want to lie to you every day. You sit there like, oh yeah, this is nice. Some responsibility for your life. Right? All right. So that's the analysis I would expect that would be low-hanging fruit for you. If I say analyze the situation before, using that sentence as the feeder for the analysis, go from importing to self-sufficient. And we say, well, let's assume the price is constant, which is an assumption we make. We don't know for sure. Assume the price is constant. They decided rather than importing that they're going to produce it themselves. Why is that a good policy? First of all, is it a good policy? Do you have an opinion? Apart from Suharto wanting to make sure that they're not importing, they asked the question, what else was going on in the first part of the video? Yes, sir.
Well, if you're a great number of farmers, then people who benefit from price controls might outnumber the people who benefit from importing.
Yeah. So the analysis is far more complex than I'm presenting it right now. So I want to make sure that you are not missing anything. As you hear this young man speak, roads are important. Roads create opportunities for trade and to go to school and to grow more rice. Okay, on the back side. I think I missed some of what he said. In the video, he talked about lining up, queuing to get rice on Saturday mornings. And you'd get there and say, okay, the rice is gone. Which meant there was a shortage. Then there's a shortage, there's an excess demand. So you want to make sure that you understand that. So there's excess demand and no imports. Because if they're going to fix it, solve the excess demand by importing, and they did not. Why is there a shortage?
I don't think that's right. No.
Okay. So we have to ask the question, could they not import? I mean, the dictator could have said, okay, we're going to take the money we have and import to make sure everybody is taken care of. Because importing solves the problem right now. Teaching them how to fish or plant rice and grow more rice faster in the next couple of years will solve a longer-term problem. In the short term, you fix the problem by importing. And the question is, why did they not do that? I'm not sure.
Well, they did at first. They were the world's largest importer of rice for a while.
Right. But the fact that you have a shortage says you're not importing enough. So it may raise questions about the price. We say, well, gee, we can't afford to import anymore. We have no money left. So we're going to try and grow in the future, but it's clearly a problem. Or maybe the person telling the story is telling us the fiction. So the research will tell us what the truth was. But I think that there was a problem because the young man who's a scientist now told us that you would queue and then there would say, no more rice. Make one more comment about that and I'll move on. What's wrong with the policy that they were using to distribute the rice? And what's right about it? If they have the rice there, people are queuing to get the rice, and then you tell the last few people, sorry, no, none of that. What's wrong with the policy? As an economics student, so which variable am I looking for?
Importing is too expensive.
So what's the variable?
Price.
Price. The price wasn't set right. If you're running out of rice, people are queuing to get rice and you're running out. The price is set too low.
I thought they weren't paying for it.
If they weren't paying, then the price is set too low. That's zero.
Well, I thought they were rationing it out, so I thought they were giving too large a quantity. But if they're paying for it,
Then the price is too low, including the price of zero. So we want the economic analysis to come out beyond just the facts. How would you interpret what is going on? However they're doing this, they could have fixed the problem with the appropriate price, which would solve the problem. The question is, because the supply is given now, it is what it is. It's a vertical supply curve. This is the quantity we have. If you're pricing it too low such that the demand is still higher than the quantity at that price, whether the price is 0 or 1 or 2, then what's an alternative way of handling that? Raise the price. So somebody had to be dictating the policy all the way. And obviously when you're dictating the policy, you're not necessarily going to get it right. You'll have these inefficiencies. The market would have solved the problem, and somebody would have gotten rich in the process. But if you are subsidizing it, you're not trying to make anybody rich. The government is trying to make sure that there's good reach across the country. All right, flip to the back side and see what we can do with these graphs here. So obviously we work backwards. If you go from having a large enough supply to a smaller supply, the price is going to go higher when the crop is devastated. I'm going to leave that alone. I think we've kind of trained ourselves on how to read. We're reading for the economic content, not for the pictures. Trying to say, well, gee, as an economics student, if I just had the text, what would I do with the text? The critical thinking part. So we're going to do a simple analysis here. So our economy has 5 workers. And to keep things simple, we're going to make the prices of the products 1 each. Price of manufacturing is 1, price of agriculture is 1. We don't need that, it's just a simplifying assumption. Prevent the number of variables from being too cumbersome. We have 2 production functions. They're both quadratic, increasing at a decreasing rate. Hopefully you can see that. So the production functions look like that. Quantity against input. And we have 1 input that is shown, that's labor. Obviously, you can't produce with just labor. You need raw materials, you need capital, you need techniques, you need capital. But sometimes you put all these variables in the background and say, assume there's a certain amount of land available. Now let us ask, as you add labor, how does the output change? And that's what you see here. Those quadratic functions of Q against L both look like that, increasing at a decreasing rate. The appropriate graphs to keep in mind would be average product curves and marginal product curves. The master key that unlocks every neoclassical economics problem is marginal. Then you get to graduate school, if you go to graduate school, when you're in doubt about what to do, differentiate. Take a first derivative, you get the right answer. Because the first derivative is a marginal, and marginal is the magic key that opens every door in economics. When in doubt, differentiate. Well, that means you have to do a little bit of calculus. Otherwise, just remember marginal. Whatever I tell you, your answer needs to be marginal. The right answer is always marginal. Average is an awful answer. Marginal is the right answer. But we're going to tell the story using average with your knowledge that average is the wrong answer. And then the question is, if it's the wrong answer, why do people use it? People use average because it's straightforward. Marginal requires too much information. Average is easy. Total divided by the input, or whatever the case might be. Average is so easy. It's such, can I say low-hanging fruit again? It's so easy to do that we default to easy. Expedient is what I should say. So the story that will be told in the Lewis model and in many of our models is that we share the output among the workers. If you're thinking of an agricultural situation, think of harvest time. We call it as many people as possible to help you harvest. At the end, you pay everybody equally. That's the deal. Everyone gets the same wage, average, based on your average productivity. This means that you can't measure how much each worker is doing, but you're taking the total and you're saying, let's assume if there are 10 workers and the output is 100, the average worker is producing 10. And you're going to use that number of pay. You may pay them 9 or 8. But that's the mechanism that's being used. It's the wrong mechanism, but it's expedient because the informational requirements to do marginal will be, I need now to take a first derivative, or whatever the case might be. Paying at the margin is efficient. It's just more costly to figure that out. So we have 5 workers, and the question is, what's the maximum amount of output we can get? I have not included the overall level of output. I showed you the average, but it's easy to fix that. I'm saying that 1 worker will produce 9 units of output, 2 workers will produce 16 units of output, 3 workers will produce 21 units of output, 4 workers will produce 24 units of output, 5 workers will produce 25 units of output. And again, that graph looks like that, increasing at a decreasing rate. Got that? I held these numbers back, but you can easily get them. If I had given you the total and said, tell me the average, you'll divide the total by the number of workers and get the average. If I give you the average, you can reverse engineer to get the totals. That's what the production function looks like. What does the average product function look like? So I'm measuring average product of labor, and it's, look at these 2 columns here. What do they have in common? What's the relationship between those 2 columns? Add up to 10. So if 2 numbers add up to 10, here's 10, there's 10. Well, duh. X plus y equals 10 when x is 0, y is 10 when y is 0, x is 10. So that's what the average product in this analysis looks like. Or you could have plotted it, but I just short-circuited the process by saying, hey, look, add up to 10. That's secondary. The important thing is that you know that we can sketch the average product curve. And I want to introduce the idea of the marginal product. Notice that when the quantity of labor is 5, the marginal product is going to be 1. When the quantity of labor is 1, the marginal product is 9. You probably wouldn't be upset or disappointed if I did that. That's the marginal product of labor in agriculture. This is the average product of labor in agriculture. Approximately, that's what they look like. I'm doing all this to make one point. There's a relationship between average and marginal. And you've met it before, and you probably forgot it. Hopefully you haven't. What's the relationship between average and marginal?
Marginal curve is twice as slow.
Twice as steep. If you keep that in mind, from a generic function, if you have a straight line average, the marginal is going to slope twice as steeply. Or if it doesn't slope twice as steeply, approximately twice as steeply. This is a relationship that you cannot opt to forget. So let's use the function and try and do that calculation. So with the function given as Q equals 10L minus L squared, the average product of labor is Q divided by L, 10 minus L. Yes or yes? Just divided by L. The marginal product requires that I do that first derivative thing, which is 10 minus 2L. So the 2 comes down in front of the L when I differentiate. So that's the heavy math of what the thing looks like, and the slope here is twice as steep. Twice as steep. So that's what we have in the graphical analysis. I'm trying to just hit the high notes here. No deep level of math. I'm just trying to get you to remember certain fundamental things. When you draw the average product curve, you know where the marginal product curve is going to be. Marginal is the master key that unlocks the door to every economics problem as an efficient solution. Average is like a red herring. If you use it, you're going to come to the wrong answer. And the question is, why is it being used? So I said that the farmers are paying all of the workers the same wage because they can't measure each worker's productivity. Unless they know that this one worker is handicapped and works slower than the other guy, they're going to say, no, let's assume everybody's doing the same thing. Or you may have a very efficient worker who is loafing because he knows that he's a hard worker and he figures, hey, the others are not working as hard, so I'm going to slack off. And the productivity goes down because of him shirking. Or you may have a lazy worker, not just a lazy worker, who decides, I'm going to show up for work and do nothing. Have you ever seen a shirker before? So for whatever reason, the use of the average product is fraught with problems that unless you're monitoring each individual, you can't see what's going on. So you just say, let's pay everybody equally, assume they're all contributing equally, or whatever the case may be. A more socialist perspective, and I said when India and China and Pakistan and Indonesia, when these countries are coming on stream now to be part, not China, to become part of this neo-colonial world, coming out of colonialism, maybe I used the term incorrectly, they're all asking which method is going to be best for us. And I said that they're looking north and seeing Russia, Soviet Union, and China, communists, and saying these countries probably have a better way for us to move forward than capitalism, because capitalism will only increase the income inequality. The rich are going to hold the poor by their ankles and shit to get whatever else is left in their pockets because they're smarter. They've been in the game longer. That's a nice way or bad way of saying that inequality is going to increase when you unleash capitalism on a brand new economy where the majority of people are either illiterate or have 3 years of schooling or whatever. The people with the smarts will figure out a way to take from the people who don't have. Inequality will increase. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. That's why top-down policies like what Suharto is doing in Indonesia is saying, I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen in my country. Because the capitalists that we push out needed to be gone. And I think it was the Dutch who were controlling Indonesia up until 1947. So whatever the ex-colonials put in place, we need to undo that and make sure we find our own path forward. Solutions come from within. Even if you have to have a dictator to get that solution, in the hopes that the people will comply. A benevolent dictator. So we know what the average product curve looks like, and I'm going to go for the second sector, which is manufacturing, and do the same thing, and it will not surprise you that I will get a similar analysis. The average product of labor in manufacturing and the marginal product of labor in manufacturing. They can be measured on the same axis, and what I'm going to do is some sleight of hand, and hopefully you will be wowed by it. If you're not wowed, it's because you've seen the trick before. So I'm going to give you the horizontal axis with 5 workers. So this is the vertical axis, that's either average product or marginal product. Why can't we measure these on the same axis? Because they have the same last name. Average product is output per unit labor. Marginal product is change in output on change in labor. So the numerator is quantity, the denominator is labor. They have the same last name. So you can measure them on the same axis. You saw me draw these 2 graphs there. Nobody asked why, but kind of makes sense, right? Why you can do that. And I'm going to draw the average product curve, average product of labor in agriculture. And what I'm going to do now is to take the second panel, which is in manufacturing, and make this the origin for manufacturing, and the 5 is going to be here. So I'm going to be measuring labor in manufacturing going this way, labor in agriculture going that way, such that LA plus LM equals 5. I'm going to allocate the 5 workers. And I'm going to put in the average product curve for manufacturing. Clearly it's going to go this way because this is the origin. I'm looking from the back of the screen. So if I hold this paper up, it will look normal to you, right? So this is the average product of labor in manufacturing.
Why backwards, Dr. Gottlieb?
So that you will ask the question, just so that we can have a private class and the others are spectators on our conversation. The intersection of average gives us the allocation of workers L subscript 0. If you equate average product of labor in agriculture with the average product of labor in manufacturing, the intersection of those 2 average product curves when they have 5 workers will give you, I want to say equilibrium. It'll give you an answer. If I were to use the marginal product curves, which is what you ought to use, twice as steep, marginal product of labor in agriculture, marginal product of labor, twice as steep, marginal product of labor in manufacturing. I'm not going for a high level of science here. I'm just saying that the intersection of the 2 marginals will be at a different point. So when I equate marginal product of labor in agriculture with marginal product of labor in manufacturing, I get a different solution. Equating the marginals will give me the best answer. Equating the averages will give me an answer, and hopefully they'll coincide. But you have to do the math to figure out if they're going to coincide. So this question will be on your test. Can you solve this question? There are other ways to handle this. If you don't want to do the graphical analysis, can I segue from this right now? So on Moodle you would have seen this, or will see this, same analysis. Here I plug in the numbers into the functions. Okay? So I have my 2 production functions. I'm plugging in the allocation of 0, 5. Nobody in manufacturing, everybody in agriculture. So get the output in manufacturing, I get 25 units of output in agriculture. With a price of 1 and 1, the revenue is going to be 25. First row make sense? I'm not going to move on until I get a confirmation. If I allocate all of the workers to the agricultural sector, I'm plugging 5 into the first equation. I get 10 times 5 is 50, minus 25 is 25. That's the only production in the economy. Output is 25, revenue is 25, GDP is 25. Yes or yes? If I decide to move 1 worker into the manufacturing sector, plug 1 into the second equation, LM equals 1, I get 20 minus 4 equals 16. I have 4 workers in the agricultural sector. 40 minus 16 equals 24. 16 plus 24 is 40. The GDP is 40. Yes or yes? Last example. A second worker goes into manufacturing. Plug 2 and 3 into the 2 functions. You get an output of 45. I will tell you that there are 2 other allocations I can have, or 3 others actually. And you see that 45 is the highest output I can get in this analysis. That's the best allocation. What rule would have gotten me there? Equating the marginals. If I equated the averages, I would have gotten a different number than when I equate the marginals. Let me show you what happens when I equate the marginals. I said that the marginal product of labor in agriculture, if you differentiate the equation, you get 10 minus 2L. And the marginal product of labor in manufacturing, 20 minus 8L. So I set the marginals equal to each other. And I say marginal revenue because the price is 1. That's the marginal product, but times 1 is marginal revenue. Equate the marginals. Use the information that I only have 5 workers to allocate between the two sectors. The marginal equations gave me, when I combine them, and again, this is something that you should not sweat over. Combine those, I get 4LM minus LA equals 5. Just a distillation of the two equations. And I know that the 5 workers is LM plus LA equals 5. If I add these two equations together, the LA's cancel, and I get 5LM equals 10, which means that LM equals 2, which means that LA equals 3. LM equals, I've circled, LM equals 2, LA equals 3, you get 45 as the GDP. When you equate the marginals, you'll get the highest GDP. Let's see what would happen if I equated the averages. I'm telling you that this is what Lewis basically was proposing. That the problem in many developing countries, he was saying, is that they were allocating according to equating averages rather than equating marginals. So if I equated averages, let me back up a little bit. That's the same solution, isn't it? And let's show you what happens when you equate averages. I thought I had it written out. So the average would be 10 LA minus LA equals 20. I guess that would have disappeared. 10 minus LA equals 20 minus 4 LM. Are you still with me? I'm just dividing the production functions by L to create the definition of average. Yes or yes? Is anyone sleeping? Half asleep? Okay. What do I get? I get 10, I get 4 LM minus LA equals 10. This is equating the average products. Equal. Notice when I equated the marginal products, I got 4 LM minus LA equals 5. This was equated marginal products. So you see that they give me a different solution. Equated marginals gives me a different solution than equated averages. On both of these, I have to do LM plus LA equals 5. LM plus LA equals 5. So that's where the difference is. When you equate the averages, you get a different equilibrium than when you equate marginals. So you get a different allocation and a different output. You okay?
Yeah.
La La Land?
Yeah, it's been a long day.
Yeah, I get it. So let's do the math here. 5 LM equals 15. 5 LM equals 10. LM equals 3. LM equals 2. LM equals 3 is right here. When you allocate 3, 2, you get an output of 40. When you allocate 2, 3, you get an output of 45. Equated averages gives you a lower output than equated marginals. Yes or yes? That's Lewis's whole point. Yes.
So, for the example, we're going to need to know how to do all three, like graphically analyze it, do it in the table, equate marginals.
Write your own question.
Huh?
You want to do all three? All three. All right. Just write the test question. All three. You're the man.
It's all the same. I just wondered if we're going to have the
Choice.
Okay.
Yeah. So now you've given me ideas on how to structure the question. Ask me again on Thursday. Hopefully I thought about it. But the economic students, we tame the wild animal, we go grab it by the neck and toss it to the ground. We say, oh man, yes. And we pound our chest, right? We show off that we can solve these problems. We don't timidly run away. I don't know how to solve. We don't do that. We don't do that, right?
No.
We pound our chests.
Well, this is 30-30 stuff, so I still remember this.
All right. So, low hanging fruit.
Right.
The point, the takeaway is, equating marginals will give you the best answer. Equating averages will give you a different answer. This is what Lewis saw. Now, Lewis, I met Sir Arthur. I helped him park his car the first time I met him because he couldn't see out of one eye. To meet the great man, the biggest disappointment, I had never read anything by him when I met him the first time. So embarrassed. To meet a Nobel Prize winner, to go introduce yourself to him and say, I've never read your work. What kind of economics professor are you? You've never read my work? So I made it my life mission to become an economist who understood development so that I could teach Lewis's model. I'm embarrassed by that.
Is that actually true?
It's actually true. Actually true. To come in the presence of greatness, and he says, so who are you? What's your claim to fame? You don't know, I know who you are, but I haven't read your work. So I'm embarrassed over that. And I shouldn't tell the story because it makes me look bad, right? But anyway, honesty is a good policy. I've just showed you what Arthur Lewis saw when he went to Africa. He saw farmers and harvesters working together and sharing the crop in this average sense, and the recognition that you're getting an efficient outcome. But he told me, I don't know the math. He said, I regret not studying mathematics. We still have some time, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay. Making me nervous. Huh? Okay, just getting more comfortable. Now, he didn't do it like this, obviously. And the reason I do it like this is because I said, we've advanced. He did this in the 50s. It's 70-something years later. If you can do it this way and get it the first time, you don't have to struggle through the story. Because a lot of great works, the first time the idea is brought up, it's not easy to explain because nobody's explained it yet. So you fumble through the best way to say it. And then over time, better ways develop to say it. And then you say, I wish I'd said it the way people are now saying it. For example, the first video lecture I ever made was that Arthur Lewis video lecture. It's terrible. I know it's terrible. I was so proud of that thing, and now I'm embarrassed by it. But it's the most viewed video lecture on the Lewis model on the internet. It has enough dislikes to tell you that, it has like an 80%, 85% like to dislike ratio. 85. Anyway, the point is this.
It's not that appropriate.
So a friend of mine redid it, and I put the link to his lecture on Moodle. You probably should study from his rather than mine. But you have to know mine because I'm the instructor. I'll tell you the difference. So basically, what many textbooks and other YouTubers do is they go through the lecture the way the person meant it to be done. And I went straight for the jugular and said, here's the efficiency in the model. This is what he really meant to say. So a lot of the people who look at my contribution keep thinking, we don't understand this, it's above their heads. Because many of them are, it's most viewed in India, where high schoolers are doing this economics course. And it's above their head because they did it for this class 8 years ago. And they're looking at it and saying, we don't understand it, and they give a thumbs down. So they want it to be simplified, which I understand. If I were to do it again, I would do it better, with better technology, because there's a droning sound in the background that's annoying to you, and I feel badly. So that's why I said, look at my friend's version of the lecture rather than mine. But don't give it a thumbs down. I had a student last semester who failed the class, and they gave like 8 of my videos thumbs down the next day because they hated me. I get that. The perils of being a professor, Student rage. So you understand this graph? You understand the analysis when you equate averages is going to be different than when you equate marginals, and that the total output will be lower when you equate averages than when you equate marginals. Let me draw that one more time to help you see this point. And if we never do a more sophisticated version of the problem, I think that driving home the problem, the solution, is the best thing. On the back of the handout, I have example number 2. Same nonsense, different day. The functions are a little different, the numbers are higher. Instead of 5 workers, it's 20 workers. But that doesn't scare you, right? We count the checks. We show off. 5 workers, 20 workers, 1 million workers, a real economy, we know to solve the problem. Yes or yes? We can solve the problem. So, I want to ask a question. I think it's a profound question. And it might not be profound. It might just be all in my head. So I'm going to borrow this for a second. If I mark on it, then that means that I like you. So we have our functions here. The equations are a little different. I'm just going to write them out to make the life a little easier, I think. QA equals 16L minus 0.4L squared. This is the one I used in the video lecture. And QM equals 10LM minus 0.1 LM squared. Thank you. The question I ask is, determine, the last question, determine how the workers should allocate themselves if there are only 15 workers. So they're from 20 to 15. That's the problem I gave you. And once you recognize the problem, the question is, can you tame that wild animal? Do you know what to do? The answer is, of course I do know what to do. I need to equate the Marshall product in agriculture with the Marshall product in manufacturing, and then need to have LM plus LA equals 15. That's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. Equate marginals, use the constraint, you get the highest output. If you equate averages and apply that constraint, you'll get a lower number. We just did it with LM plus LA equals 5. First two versions of the problem say make it 20, then I say lower to 15. Here's the $1 million question, $5 question, last question. And we'll probably come back to Haradomar. If I don't, it's still on the test. Okay, I'll come back to it because I did give myself an extra hour and 15 minutes. I want you to try here. Using the wrong rule. We're just giving everybody the same thing because give everybody a B plus. Don't figure out who's the A and who's the D. Give everyone a B plus. Average for the same. Okay, same average. As you do the analysis here, you're going to discover something that I think is intriguing or maybe profound. So the average product curves, and I'm going to borrow a minute here from you. The average product in agriculture, APA, it's all on the handout by the way, 16 minus 0.4 LA, and APM, 10 minus 0.1 LM. So imagine that you have all 15 workers in agriculture. And you're paying them the average as their salary. This is Lewis's starting point. We have this rural economy. All the farmers are paying all the workers the same thing because they can't measure the individual productivity. So you have 15 workers. What's the pay or the wage for each of the workers? You plug 15 in here. 15 times 0.4 is 1.5 times 4, which is, I know, it's too late to ask the question. 6. So the average is 10. Thank you, John. Move one of the workers into this sector. What's his average? Put a 1 here. And you see why nobody's going to move into the sector on his own. If they're going to get paid 10, why would you move here and get paid less than 10?
It's irrational.
Huh?
It's irrational.
Irrational. I want you to tell me the takeaway and then you can leave. Repeat what we just said in your own words. You have 15 workers in the economy. They're all in the agricultural sector. You want to start them a manufacturing sector.
Pay them more than ag.
Sorry?
Pay them more than they're making ag.
Nobody's going to come. Nobody's going to leave a sector where they're making 10 and go to a sector where they're making less than 10. So the way to get this sector up is to pay them even more. But if you pay them more, you have nothing left over, then that's not a good deal. So at some level, some kind of trick needs to be applied to the economy. Or a problem that currently exists needs to be fixed. And the problem is that we're paying these guys too high. That's the germ of Lewis. That the people in the agricultural sector are getting paid the average. Remember, the average is going to be a higher number than the marginal. But the farmer in charge doesn't have the will to reduce their salary because he can't measure their productivity. And as a result, you end up with too many people staying in agriculture. And you can't get people to move into manufacturing. So what's the problem? The rule. The pay rule is the problem. You're paying too much. So fix that somewhere, the problem. If you get what I just said, you understand the end point of Lewis. I'll see you on Thursday. By then you would have studied Lewis and Howard Domar. That's your homework.